Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my championship review. A little late, I chose to re-record this, so without saying too much, let's get straight into this thing. So, to start off this one, to be honest, I didn't really know much about either of these teams. Mainly, the only thing notable about these teams is that Army, I know their quarterback Bryson Daly has had a pretty good year, and the Army defense has definitely had a good year, but they got trounced against Notre Dame. And Tulane has actually relatively competed. They should have beat Kansas State, but they barely let it go. And then they lost on the road to Oklahoma, but when they lost that Memphis game, that was a pretty bad loss. That should have been my indicator to take Army instead of Tulane, but for some reason I took Tulane. I don't really know. I don't really remember why. That was looking back, that was a dumb pick. At least I had it being like close though, but Army ended up dominating. I think they were up like, if I remember correctly, they were up like 35-0. I could be absolutely lying out of my booty hole though. But yeah, Army. It shows you how weak the group of five really is, though. No, they were up 35-7 at most, but it really shows you how weak the group of five is, because a team like Tulane is like competing in their American Athletic Championship, the AAC Championship. This team was up to like number 17 in the country, and if they didn't lose to Memphis, there was definitely a world in which this team could have made the college football playoff. Now, if they would have beaten Army, if they were at 2 losses and they beat Army and Clemson beat SMU, Tulane could have maybe made it into the college football playoff. But thankfully, Memphis pulled through there and killed the hopes of that. I'm just in Army, obviously, as a case to be in the college football playoff, because they were a 1-loss team. And it is disrespectful to them to not even really consider it. Like, we completely just glossed over them, and Army fans are probably pretty pissed off. But in reality, if they would have made the Notre Dame game a lot closer, they definitely would have been considered. However, they got blown up by Notre Dame. Like, they got destroyed, which I really think is the indicator between these small schools playing bad schedules versus these big schools playing, I wouldn't say good schedules, because Notre Dame's schedule is pretty relatively easy so far. I say easy, but if it was like Ohio State playing this schedule, this team would be undefeated. Like, on the road at A&M, 4-loss team. Hosting Louisville, 4-loss team. On the road at Georgia Tech without Haynes King, 5-loss team. The hardest team in theory would have been Army. We're not counting on the road at Navy because they collapsed. So Notre Dame's schedule for a team as high-powered as they are, it's a pretty relatively easy schedule. So I'm not mad that Army wasn't really considered. If Army would have made it, that would have made for a bad playoff game. But congratulations to Army for having such a good year. The question is that quarterback for them a senior? He is. That's unfortunate. He is a senior. They still have to play the Navy Army game. Still has to be played. I was like, why do they have 2 games? Army's bowl game is already set. That's so weird. And yet they still have one more game to play. Very interesting. But yeah, this game happened. Very cool. Boise State versus UNLV. I made a separate reaction video glazing Boise State. Prepare for mic noise. Oh, it wasn't that loud this time. I made a separate video glazing Boise State and Ashton Jeanty because I saw them and they were dominant in the first half of football. And then I was like, well, their defense shut down UNLV. But then something happened. And that was called Penn State. Really quickly, here's my prediction. I said UNLV's defense would stop this team and their offense would catch fire. The problem was their offense didn't show up at all until like the second half, and even then, they still got held out of the end zone on stupid occasions. UNLV's offense was the pathetic part of this. But as I was glazing Boise State and whatnot, I posted that video, and then the championship games happened. I watched pretty much all of them except for the Oregon Penn State one because I don't get CBS. So I didn't get to really watch that, but I saw the stats. And something that is very, very notable about that Penn State-Oregon game. I don't want to talk about that game too much yet, but they had about 300 rushing yards of offense. Ashton Jeanty's considerably best performance was against Oregon. It was against Oregon. He put up like 192 yards and 3 touchdowns or something like that. I think I might be on the dime. That's how good my football memory is. But then you look at how Penn State played, and while, yes, Penn State does have 2 running backs that are both very good, not just one singular running back, but 2, they did not have a problem running the ball against Oregon. And that leads me to believe that all of a sudden this team has dropped back down to a bit fraudulent because this team's run offense looks so good. Their pass offense, in my opinion, is super underrated. They have a sneaky good pass offense, but in terms of their rush offense, that's the star of the offense. But Oregon's run defense was ranked like super highly, but it doesn't seem like teams are they're not having a hard time running the ball against Oregon, and Penn State proved that. And quite frankly, Penn State has not been an offensive team this year whatsoever. I think their highest scoring game up until this game that wasn't just a complete and utter blowout was against USC, and that game went into overtime. I guess you could maybe say the Bowling Green Penn State game. Penn State put down one more point in normal time. I guess that would be your best example, would be Penn State Bowling Green, which a lot of people forget. Penn State almost lost that game to Bowling Green. But I'm just saying this one has suddenly taken the throne of the highest scoring game, and it was back and forth. And Penn State's not having any issues putting down 300 rushing yards of offense. And all of a sudden, well, here's the final score of this game. But now I look at Boise State, and I'm like, I don't know how you guys are going to perform against an actual rush defense. Because the thing is Boise State is the 3 seed. So who would they get? That's the question. I don't know who they get. Do they get Penn State? I think they get the winner of the Penn State SMU game, which, I mean, SMU, in my opinion, can win that game. I think SMU can win that game. It is on the road at Penn State, so that's going to be very difficult for SMU, and quite frankly, I think that'll take the toll because, quite frankly, the Clemson game was practically a home game, and they let that get to their head, and they let the game really slip away from them because they brought that thing all the way back and showed what team they actually are than what played in the first half. But if you're going to make those mistakes against Penn State in Penn State's home stadium, Penn State won't. And but either way, the winner of that game gets to play Boise State. And both of those teams, SMU, I would say less than Penn State by quite a bit, but both those teams have had explosive runs throughout the season and ultimately explosive offenses, but more importantly, they have had very much better run defenses, like way better run defenses. Penn State mainly has been based around the run, or just based around defense, sorry. But SMU held Clemson rushing to just 64 yards. And also, I just got to mention, I know we'll talk about that later, sorry. Keep going. Clemson just had 64 yards of rushing against SMU's defense, and as much as I'd love to bore you with stats of other games, I'm not going to. But Penn State also held Oregon's rush defense to just 186 yards, which is still quite a bit. Don't get me wrong, but their main running back had 20 carries for 87 yards. A lot of other yards came from. Oh, I guess the other yards came from the other running back as well, and then some from Dylan Gabriel. Not too much. I assumed it would be from Dylan Gabriel running the ball a lot. But I'm just saying, wow, Tez Johnson had a game. Whoa, holy crap. But I'm just saying, Penn State's rush defense going up against an Oregon offense, Penn State's rush defense may struggle to hold Ashton Jeanty to a bad game or to even a mediocre game. But I'm going to say if Penn State plays Boise State or even SMU, the Boise State offense is going to have a really hard time working against these defenses because these are really elite defenses we're dealing with here. And then the question is how does Boise State's defense hold up against these offenses? I think that's where Boise State might get exposed. I think that's where Boise State might fall apart and get exposed. So I just wanted to talk about that for a bit because I made a video glazing because it was a recency cremation, I guess. I was glazing hard because I just watched Ashton Jeanty break away and I was like, I'll see it now. But now I'm back to the way I was because then does it lead into this? Yes, it does. Then after that, I witnessed Cam Scatterby again. And I was reminded as to how much of a different running back, and I'll stand by this, how much of a better running back Cam Scatterby is. Hate me if you want from saying that. You can hate me all you want. But, dude, watching this guy play football and watching the runs he had against Iowa State's defense, they were not free, open, just brought like giant holes from his offensive line. While the O-line does do a great job, they weren't like just these gaping holes that Ashton Jeanty has to weave his way through. No, they're like maybe about 5 yards before you run into a brick wall, but it's Cam Scatterby. And that's where he's the best running back in the league right now, is because he doesn't get stopped there. He keeps going, and then he keeps going, and then he keeps going. There was only one run in which he used the hole and maneuvered in a way Ashton Jeanty would. A lot of his other breakaway runs were literally just him breaking tackles and bulldozing through people. He had an absolutely unreal game. I'm pissed that I picked Iowa State in this game, but I really thought Jordan Tyson missing was going to be a massive piece gone. But the pass offense didn't stop. And that was what was so cool, was because when Jordan Tyson was gone, the other receivers showed that they are some of the best receivers a team could ask for. I mean, Xavier Guillory balled out. He had some fabulous catches for touchdowns. Melquan Stovall was all over the field. He had that huge 4th-and-1 breakaway touchdown, as well as even Cam Scatterby was getting passes. And if Sam Levitt didn't have anybody open, he can always just turn on the jets and run for like 15 to 20 yards. He's fast, dude. He reminds me of Lamar Jackson. I know that might sound insane, but he really does, dude. Like, this kid shows a lot of potential. He's just a freshman. And ASU ended up dominating. And I think just the star of this game, even though the whole team played well, like every single aspect of ASU played fabulously, the star of this show was definitely Cam Scatterby. There is no question about it. Cam Scatterby took the show away with his breakaway runs. When you perform like that, there is no stopping you. He only finished the day with 16 carries and 170 yards. But what's even crazier was 6 of those carries came in the second half and only tallied on 30 yards. The first half, dude had 10 carries for 140 yards. He was absolutely ripping it up. And when the run game wasn't working anymore, like when he was slowing down, probably because he was tired, he was catching the ball, and he caught like one screen pass for 5 yards and then another one for like 33 and a touchdown. He does it all. He tallied on about 200 total yards of offense, which he almost beat out Sam Levitt in passing yards, and that's a quarterback. That's kind of crazy. Sam Levitt, on the other hand, is balling out, because while he barely beat Scatterboo in yards in terms of just passing, he only threw 17 passes and completed 12 of them, yet he's tallying on 219 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 12.9 yards a throw. Every time Bro throws the ball, he could get a first down if he kept on moving at the pace he was. And better yet, on the floor, he had 7 carries for 33 yards, and that includes one of the bad sacks he took for like a loss of 12. So, I mean, ASU was just dominant. And from what I said, also ASU had 64 yards of penalties to Iowa State's 10, which was big. But Iowa State ultimately decided to take the show away in the turnover game by just slinging us 3 turnovers, which was very cool. ASU's only failed 4th down conversion came in shit time when the backups were in. Jeff Sims just ran for like a 4th and 18 or something like that. But ASU dominated, in my previous videos, I said teams that I would be scared of would definitely be, like, I said it would be Boise State, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Indiana. Remove Boise State from that. Remove Oregon from that and put in ASU. I would be terrified to play ASU right now. I would be terrified. Truly. This team looks very scary right now. It's kind of crazy to say that ASU looks this good right now. I mean, this is really something I never thought I would be saying as an ASU fan. We are in the college football playoff, and we look like one of the best teams in the league, and we're 11-2. I mean, like, nobody thought this would happen, not even me. I gave ASU the benefit of the doubt that no people would, and I said ASU would go 5-7 this year. I wanted to say 6-6, but I kept my bias out, and I said 5-7. Even though I got to witness this team early in Camp Tonazona, I watched them play. I literally still said ASU would go 5-7. And I mean, we were just so wrong. We were all so wrong. They're 11-2, and they look so good right now. And I love it. It is so amazing to see that I can watch football again and not just be devastated every Saturday. They're winning football games now. It is amazing to see. Next game, Georgia versus Texas. So I think I went like 1-6. I think I went like 1-6 on championship weekend. Yeah, I went 1-6. And the one that I got was the one I was most confident in. And it was close, and Texas definitely performed much better than I thought they would, especially offensively. They still were not good enough. And what's most embarrassing about this for Texas is while they had 3 turnovers yet again, like you get your second shot at Georgia and you dump turnovers. They also had 94 yards of penalties. And they had 400 yards of offense, yet they're only tallying on 19 points. That's poor football. That's poor football. If you're Texas and you're the favorite and you're this and that, you cannot be performing like this. This happened once against Georgia, and then the world gave Texas the benefit of the doubt. I didn't. And guess what? They failed again. And what's even worse is, they're losing in overtime in a close game. This Georgia team was without Carson Beck for the second half of football. And while I would say they arguably got better because of that, they also, like Carson Beck, I would say they weakened the Texas defense. Like, they took away their energy through the first half and whatnot, and the team was starting to get tired and whatnot. And then Gunnar Stockton came in and easily took that show away from them. Because even then, while Gunnar Stockton looked like a better option for Georgia, he really wasn't that much better. He only threw for 71 yards. He did complete 12 of his 16 passes, but he only threw for 71 yards. He ran for 8, but some of those were runs, some of those were sacks, so it's like different. One of those runs was clutch as well. But that interception he threw was terrible. I mean, Georgia could have completely avoided overtime. This Texas team was not getting in the end zone if Georgia kicked a field goal and went up 19-13. Texas was not getting in the end zone, but I guess it worked out for Georgia because they still won the football game. But that interception he threw was absolutely terrible. And the thing is Texas's offense still looks really bad, in my opinion. Quite frankly, while Texas had 358 yards over the air, they had 31 rushing yards. They can't run the ball. You can expect this Texas team to pretty much throw the ball like every single play. And even then, when I'm watching this team play, aside from the throws to the middle of the field, which I enjoyed those, I thought the Texas offense didn't look terrible when they were making plays like that. Texas was they were just trying to sling the ball deep on these fade routes and give their players one-on-ones and stuff. And while it was, in quotations, working, it also wasn't working because Texas wasn't getting in the end zone. And that's simply all there is to it. First drive of the game opened up exactly how I expected with a Texas interception on a relatively long drive. A relatively long drive ended in an interception, but Texas's defense showed up. Another thing I expected. Then they go down the field and kick a field goal. But quite frankly, I mean, when you look at you get a Quinn Ewers pass incomplete and then offensive pass interference. It's like, okay, well, obviously, you guys, there was nothing good happening from that. Pass complete for a loss of 2. And then 3rd and 27, 15-yard run. Okay, 15-yard run on a 3rd and 27 isn't going to do you anything. And just like that, that's 100 of the 400 yards that Texas tallied on. And they're only getting 3 points from it. Again, they were really having an easy time moving the ball in the first half. They got majority of their yards. They got about 200 yards in the first half. And they had like a couple clutch time drives. While like, why is Georgia going 3 plays negative 21 yards? They're going 3 plays negative 21 yards, and they're punting, and Texas is going 5 plays 6 yards, and they're kicking a field goal. And while he missed it, like that's their Georgia was giving givens. Like they were giving givens to them on stupid things. The fumble didn't really amount to anything because it was like last play of the first half that I think hurt Carson Beck. But when they throw the interception, you go down the field and kick the game time field goal, which is like, okay, props. But again, like it was a tough drive to do that. They had to convert a 4th down and whatnot. And pretty much they were right down the 1st and 10 at the Georgia 14, y'all. And then a sack, incomplete pass, and then timeout, 4th and 15. Like, that's the offense that I was expecting from this. That's the offense I was expecting from Texas. And then what do? They go into overtime. And what's really funny to me is they put in Arch Manning and they get some of their best running they've gotten as he ran for 5 yards. Then Quinn Ewers pass incomplete. Pass complete for 6 yards, but then pass incomplete for a loss of 1, and then they kick a field goal. That's just pathetic. In overtime, that's pathetic. Because quite frankly, Georgia was just here against Georgia Tech in massive overtimes. And something that Georgia did in that overtime against Georgia Tech was they scored on every touchdown drive. Like, not the 2-point conversions, every touchdown drive. They scored on every single one, and they made it look easy. They made it look really easy. They went Gunnar Stockton pass to Oscar Delp, 9 yards. Then he goes pass for a loss of 2 yards, but then Trevor Etienne run for first down. Pass to Oscar Delp for a first down. Easy. Trevor Etienne run 2 yards. Then he runs it himself for 8 yards, and then they do a 4-yard run. That's how you move the ball. It's just so obnoxious to see this Texas team. And it hurts to watch this Texas team because they have such a doggone good defense. If they just had some capabilities offensively, they would win the national championship. But instead, they're just so poor offensively and they make so many mistakes that they're not good enough to win these games. This is Georgia, who, quite frankly, I don't think is the best team in the country. I think Notre Dame has a much better defense than Georgia's defense. And offensively, I'm not sure how Notre Dame would perform against Texas's defense. But I can tell you this much. Notre Dame's defense is much better than Georgia's defense and has been one of the best defenses in the country this year. How's Texas going to perform against a team like that, or even Ohio State? Ohio State has been, even though they lost to Michigan, a lot of people are glossing over Ohio State now, which I think could be fuel to the fire right now. They lost to Michigan, and everybody has suddenly counted them out. But quite frankly, Ohio State is still Ohio State. Even Tennessee has a solid defense. Probably not as good as Georgia's defense, but pretty solid defense. I'm just saying, there's teams out there that can stop this Texas offense with ease. Like, Georgia does not have the best defense in the country. There's no question. And Texas is barely – they got in the end zone like once. And they're just kicking field goals the rest of the game. It just was poor, pathetic, boring SEC championship. Trash. SMU versus Clemson. This game was amazing, let me tell you. Because when Boise State beat UNLV, I got depressed. Because I was like, well, if ASU wins, I guess I'm just happy that we're Big 12 champs. Because we're not going to get that 4 spot. There's no way. They're going to pick Boise State over us. And I really thought, I was like, hey, Clemson will do good, but quite frankly, this SMU team has been really good. I wasn't expecting SMU to come out and make every single mistake possible and basically give Clemson this game. And a good prediction, 38-31, that's a pretty damn good prediction. Even though I took SMU and that was wrong, I was in the ballpark. I was right there in the ballpark. I was right there in the range of this game. But, quite frankly, SMU destroyed themselves in this game. I'm happy SMU is still in the playoffs because they have 2 3-point losses on the season, whereas Alabama has been killed by Oklahoma and lost to 6-6 Vanderbilt. So I'm happy that they did the right thing and kept SMU in. But SMU did everything they could to beat themselves down. They let Clemson go right down the field on the first drive of the game and score a touchdown. It took a minute. It took 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And then, the SMU just destroyed themselves with penalties, and they destroyed themselves with turnovers. Because at the end of the game, SMU's tallying on 450 yards of offense to Clemson's 326. But Clemson's playing perfect football. They had 0 yards of penalties and 0 turnovers. 0 fourth down conversions went for. They played perfect. They didn't make any mistakes. They didn't give any givens, as well as SMU started off the game by giving them a lovely little fumble, which, 2 plays, 33 yards. So, sorry, they didn't let him go right down the field. They gave him a short field, which led to an easy touchdown. 3 plays, -1 yards for SMU. 4 plays, 28 yards. Great. That means that they had they punt the ball for 40 yards. Dude returns it for 21 yards to the SMU 45. And then SMU gets a personal foul, which puts Clemson at the SMU 28. See, they were making every mistake possible. And then SMU goes down the field, scores a touchdown. Clemson actually they rip off a good drive. Capped off by a big, long touchdown. Pause. I don't know why I said it like that. And then SMU interception. Luckily, Clemson missed the field goal, but then SMU responded by giving them even more and missing their own field goal. Punt, field goal, punt, fumble by Clemson. What? It didn't say there was any turnovers. To the SMU. Oh, I guess. I don't know. Somebody fumbled. and the ball was recovered. I think SMU fumbled. And SMU recovered. I don't know why he was saying that Clemson fumbled, because they did. And then going into halftime, you're down 24-7. And out of the gates of the second half, you start playing a bit better. You do let Clemson go down the field and score a touchdown. But then it was on for SMU. Touchdown. Make it a 10-point game. Shutting down. The SMU defense is shutting down the Clemson offense. Forced 2 3-and-outs. Clemson's defense did force their own. But then SMU kicks a field goal. Makes it a 7-point game. Punt. 14 yards, and then SMU 16 plays, 79 yards, which literally consisted of a touchdown with 16 seconds left, guys. And then what do? They let a Clemson kickoff 61 yards and returns for 41 yards to the Clemson 45. And then Cade Klubnik complete to Antonio Williams to the SMU 38 for a first down. And then they kick a game-winning field goal. SMU blew it. That's all there is to it. Don't trip. This SMU team is very good still, but they blew it, and I love it because ASU gets a bye week. Thank you, SMU. You guys absolutely blew it. This SMU team was completely capable of beating this Clemson team. It's not even funny, and they absolutely blew it, and ASU gets a bye week spot for it. Thank you. Oregon versus Penn State. Didn't get to watch this one, but I talked about it a little bit. Let's get into the balls. Let's get into this game, because quite frankly, Oregon does not look like the best team right now. Their defense looks poor. I took a shot in the dark. All right, keep in mind, this was just a complete shot in the dark. All right, I was goofing around almost when I said this, and sometimes you have to take picks like this where they're completely unexpected. I said Penn State would win. And honestly, Penn State could have. They definitely could have. But they decided to make terrible turnovers at terrible times. They threw an interception like right on their goal line. Like they threw it 10 yards down the field. Dude picked it off and took it to the 1, which gave Oregon basically defensive points. It basically gave Oregon defensive points, which ended up being the gap, pretty much, a touchdown. As well as Penn State had the opportunity to go down the field at the end of the game and try to win the game, but instead they decided, let's throw another interception, and Oregon won this. So defensively, Oregon kind of won the game, but Penn State tallied on 523 yards of offense to Oregon's 469, as well as Penn State had about 40 more yards of penalties. Those 2 turnovers were the difference. This game was winnable for Penn State. It was. It absolutely was. So I'm completely proud in my pick for picking Penn State over Oregon, because this game was definitely winnable for Penn State. It's just, of course, Penn State blew it again. So what's the final judgment here? Is Penn State actually good? I just think Oregon is maybe not as good as the undefeated team in the country, because while, yes, they are undefeated and they have quite the resume with a win over Boise State, a win over Ohio State, and a win over Penn State, those are all one-possession games that very well could have gone against Oregon, right? And as I was thinking about this, it's kind of a gift and a curse having won close games, because if you're one side of the things, you can beat Oregon, who's undefeated, who beat Boise State by 3 points, Ohio State by 1 point, and Penn State by a touchdown because Penn State kept turning the ball over. Close games that if a couple things went the opponent's way, they could have lost all 3 of those games. So Oregon maybe isn't as good as we think they are, but then you got a team like South Carolina, who took a 3-point loss off a missed field goal to LSU, and then a 2-point loss on the road against Alabama because of a poorly timed interception. And they're really good because they barely lost those games, and if a couple things went their way, they would be a 1-loss team, and then they'd be really good. And I think I've realized my logic is flawed because it goes both ways. Some teams do get lucky and win the games. Some teams don't get lucky. And if you end up getting lucky or getting the things to go your way, you end up being an overrated team for your record, and you shouldn't have that record. But if you're the team that lost all those games that were one possession, you're way better than what your record says. It goes both ways. So I do think it does. I do think we should look at it from a perspective that Oregon is winning their football games, and they should be respected for that. And while I do still think this team is beatable, they probably are still the number one team in the country because, after all, they did take down Boise State, they did take down Ohio State, and they did take down Penn State. And those are 3 quality wins, very quality wins. And they should be respected for that because they did it 3 times, even if some things went their way. After all, Oregon didn't have things go their way last year against Washington. Things went the opposite of their way last year. So maybe they're due. Or maybe Dan Lanning has learned from last year, and this is a coaching improvement, you know? But this is the last game of the championship week. I hope you guys enjoyed. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps, and that's all for me. Adios.